Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about simple IRAs and when to set one up as a court reporter and how to factor that into your financial plan and make sure you're choosing the right option when it comes to the different retirement choices that you have to choose from. So let's dive in today. A couple week hiatus from the group on the webinars, but we're ready to get back into the swing of things and get back to our weekly financial planning education. So let's get started on today's webinar on the simple IRAs. So talking about the simple IRA, first we need to know what it actually is, right? That'd be a good starting point. So what is a simple IRA? A simple IRA, actually, when you see the capital letters, I think a lot of people get confused by that, but it's actually an acronym. It stands for Savings Incentive Match Plan for Employees. And basically, it's like an IRA account that you get to save into. The only difference is that you get to contribute money as both the employer and as the employee. So you're contributing on both sides of the coin, which gives you higher contribution amounts than what you would have from just like a regular IRA, like a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. So with the simple plan, it's designed for small businesses. You have to have under 100 employees in order to set one up. So only small business plan, which isn't really a problem for you guys because most 99% of you are just one member firms or LLCs. It's like a 401k plan, but less paperwork involved. It's a little bit easier. Part of the whole simple part of the name is to try and make it as easy as possible for you. And it is a really good plan for court reporters. And especially, like I said, like you guys, where you don't have any employees, it makes this a really good option to contribute to. So for 2025 contribution limits, so as I mentioned, there's the employee and the employer side. We're going to start here with just the employee side. So on the employee side, you can contribute $16,500 as the employee. If you're over the age of 50, we do get to increase that and you get a catch-up contribution like some of the other options out there. So with the catch-up contribution, you can do another $3,500 a year into this plan. So now we're up to 20 grand. And then you also have the option to do a super catch-up. And that is the official term. I think the government doesn't get too creative here, but the super catch-up plan is if you're 60 to 63, you can do an additional $5,250 into your simple IRA. The only thing to keep in mind here, it's basically one or the other. So you're either doing $3,500 as the catch-up contribution for 50 plus, or you're doing the 5,250 if you're in those 4 years as a 60-year-old, then you can do one or the other. So the maximum you could ever put in this plan as an employee would be if you were between the age of 60 and 63, you would be doing $21,750 just as the employee only. And that's not even including what we do on the employer. So there's quite a bit of wiggle room and flexibility there. So on the employer side, this can be a little bit weird to understand, but basically as an employer, it's less flexible than some of the other plans like a SEP IRA or a solo 401k. There's not as many options to choose from here, but the options that you do get to choose from are really simple and easy to follow. So you either have a matching contribution or a non-elective contribution. So we'll start with the matching contribution. That's pretty easy. Basically, what the matching contribution is, you're matching up to 3% of your compensation into the plan. And this could be two different numbers. If you're an S Corp, it's going to be what you pay yourself as a W-2 salary. So if you pay yourself 50 grand, it's going to be $1,500 a year that you can put in to this plan. That's the maximum match. If you're a sole proprietorship, well, now it goes all the way up to what your income is after expenses for your business. So now we could be talking 100, 150, 200,000, and 3% of that number is your maximum contribution. So you can put a little bit more in if you're a sole proprietor versus an S Corp. But like we've talked about in the past, probably not worth it to switch to a sole proprietorship from an S Corp just to be able to contribute a little bit more. If you did want to do more, we'd probably look at different plans instead. And we'll talk about that in a second. The other option is if you wanted to contribute a little bit less on the employer side, you could do a 2% non-elective contribution. And basically what that means is that even if you as the employee don't add any money for this year, you still have to add money as the employer no matter what. And you're adding 2% of salary if you're S Corp or 2% of your income after expenses if you're a sole proprietor. So it really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to get as most money as you can into this plan, you're going to want to do the matching option. But if you want to back it down in a given year and not contribute as much, one way to lower it down a little bit would be to switch to the 2% non-elective option. You can switch between these every year. You just can't switch throughout the year. So you got to commit to whichever strategy you're going to be doing, but you can always change it from year to year. It's not like a permanent thing. So what are the other options to choose from and contribution limits for those? So a SEP IRA, you could do up to 77,500 if that's with catch up. All of these are with the catch up amount. So you could do around 78 grand into this plan, which is really good. But one thing we talk about with these plans and other webinars is it's only 25% of your W-2 salary as an S Corp. So that can be quite limiting for most of you because you're trying to keep your salary down for taxes, but then that's limiting how much you could do to the SEP IRA. So that's another can of worms. But when you're looking at which plan you can do or which plan you should do, this is one of the main things I look at. Is not necessarily how much you could contribute into a plan, but what do you want to contribute? So if I have a client that tells me they want to do 20 grand a year into a plan, then that helps filter down options, right? I know they can't do a traditional IRA because that's only 7, and we want to do more than that. So that option's off the table. If we want to do a SEP IRA and they only pay themselves 50 grand a year, we may not be able to do 20 grand anymore. And so now that option's off the table. And so we can't do that one. So you filter down based on what you want to do and how much you want to contribute each year to find the plan that works the best. What I found is as the contribution limits go up, the complexity of the planning and the required work goes up as well. So you always want to do the least amount of limit for what you want to contribute. So for example, if you only want to do $5,000 this year, don't open a solo 401k because there's such a high limit and you're like, hey, maybe I'll just have an insane year and want to throw 50 grand in there, right? I would keep it easy and just do the traditional IRA for this year. And then next year you can reevaluate and decide at that point if you want to open a solo 401k, because there's going to be a lot more paperwork and headaches associated there. And we want to keep this as easy as necessary, or as least complex as necessary for what you're trying to accomplish. So really just whatever's the first one that gets you closest to the limit, that's the plan we want to go with. And then as your contribution goals go up, then your planning will need to change between these different options. So who's a perfect candidate for a simple IRA? Number one is going to be, of course, you guys that are self-employed or independent contractors are going to be the best for this type of plan. Another option where this could be a good fit potentially is for officials who have transcript income that they want to sock away. You may be able to set up a simple IRA and contribute there. Double check with an accountant on that one because it depends on what you're doing through your employer, what you can do on the personal side for your 1099 income. So you need to make sure you double check those things. If your income's between 50 to 150,000, I imagine someone in this area is not going to need a solo 401k. So a simple IRA may be a better choice for them, and they can reevaluate and come back to this later as their income goes up. Like I said, their contribution amounts are going to go up, and by that point, maybe they want to start doing a solo 401k. Also, if you are maxing out your traditional IRA or Roth IRA and you're looking for the next step, I think the simple IRA is a great place to go as that next step to give you a little bit more capacity. And then lastly is the age 50 plus with catch-up provisions. That may make this an easier option where you could have been forced into a solo 401k earlier because of what you wanted to contribute. But maybe now if you're over 50 or in that 60 to 63 window, you can hit your contribution goals without having to set up a solo 401k and go with that option. Lastly, is if you're making over 200,000, I would imagine that you're probably wanting to contribute too much to do a simple IRA, and your best bet's probably going to be to look at a solo 401k, especially if you're trying to follow my general recommendation, which is saving 20% of your income towards retirement. Then that would be 40 grand a year, and that's going to be way too much for the simple IRA. When's the best time to set this plan up? The best time to set this plan up is at the beginning of the year, because it's going to give you the most time to add contributions throughout the year to this. You could still set it up right this second, which is good, and it'll be a partial year. Maybe you've been building money up in cash. I see that's very common for court reporters, that they're just socking away money and it's being built in a cash account. So maybe you have 20 grand that you want to throw into this plan. And so you can still set it up right now and max it out for the year. Also, if you are coming up on this deadline, which we are, then you got to be really careful. So your plan must be established by October 1st in order to contribute for 2025. So that's, I believe, is next Wednesday. Yeah, a week from today. So you have one more week if you want to set this plan up and contribute for 2025. So definitely something to keep in mind. Don't miss this deadline. You have one more week to get this done, and then you can contribute later, but the plan has to be set up and established by next week. So you at least have to have the account open. You don't have to start funding it yet. One thing that's important to think about is you cannot have another employer plan in the same year. So that's how all of these work, except for the traditional IRA. Sometimes those you can get away with depending on your income. But just assume for all these plans, you can only have one. You can't set up a SEP IRA and a simple IRA. I've ran into that a couple times. So you got to be very careful with these plans. The best way to do it is finish out, if you already have a plan, finish it out for the year. Do not add any money for next year. In January of next year, start the simple IRA and start a new plan. And that way you guarantee that there's no issues. One thing you really need to be careful of, though, with the simple IRA in particular, it's the only account that has this weird rule. If you contribute to a simple IRA and you start one, you cannot switch to a different plan for 2 years. So basically what that means is if I want to do a simple IRA for, if I want to do a simple IRA for 2025 and I set this account up tomorrow and I add money to it, I cannot switch to a new plan until 2028. Right? Because I need to finish out 2025 to 2026, 26 to 27, 2028, I could switch to a SEP IRA or a solo 401k or a different plan. So 99% of the time, this isn't going to be an issue. You're not going to be switching plans from year to year. But just know if you set up a simple IRA, you got to stick with that plan for the next 2 years before you can make a switch. So some of the common mistakes to avoid. Number one is we don't need to wait for a perfect income year. This is true with all the retirement plans. It's more important to get started, even if we're starting with a smaller amount, than to wait until you can max these out. A lot of people get really hung up on trying to max these plans out and do as much as they can. But it's just a random number that the government chose to say that this is the limit for the plan. It has nothing to do with you personally or your income or anything at all. So don't be worrying about trying to max the plan out just to say that I'm maxing it out. Just start with whatever number works for you. You'll probably end up maxing it out pretty quickly anyways, knowing your career trajectory. So really just focus on getting started and putting something away for your future. Also, don't confuse this with a regular IRA. They have very different rules. You have to make sure you do that employer match every year or the non-elective contribution. You can't miss out on that, or you could get in trouble if you got audited. So be careful with that. Don't forget about catch-up contributions if you're 50 plus. That could be another avenue to add another $3,500 or more into that plan. Make sure you establish before the October 1st deadline. You can set this plan up for in November, you can set this up, but you can't contribute for 2025. So you're going to have to wait after you set it up till 2026 to add any money to it. And then lastly is don't overthink it, right? We can always adjust this plan later on. You can always make tweaks and you can switch to a SEP IRA or a solo 401k 2 years from now. It's not going to make or break your financial plan. if you wanted to contribute more, but you can't for 1 or 2 years. It'll be fine. So make sure we get that started. Don't worry about it too much, and make sure that you hit those employer match and or non-elective contribution, whichever you choose. And I just put a remember here, don't forget you're the employer and the employee. So you got to do employer contributions and employee contributions. Most firms like ours, we just handle that for the client. But if you're doing this on your own, usually it's just like a drop-down menu where you switch what type of contribution it's going to be. So lastly for today is how can you set up your Simple IRA? So number one, you need to choose your provider that you want to work with to help open this account. Our firm, Traction Wealth Management, can definitely help set that up for you. Usually our account opening process is 15 minutes or less. So if you are worried about this 1 week deadline and you know you want to do this plan, but you don't know how much, you can always reach out and we can just open the account for you for free. And then we can worry about how much we're going to contribute later, but at least just get that account open is always an option. As far as forms from the IRS that you need to complete, there's a 5304 and a 5305 form. You have to fill out one of them. Basically, it's pretty simple. One says that your employee, which is you, gets to choose the investment strategy. The other one says that the employer chooses the investment strategy. It's easier just to do the one that says employee gets to choose. Even though you're the employer and the employee, it's just a lot easier to say that the employee can do whatever they want with their money when it comes to investment strategy. I'm not sure off the top of my head which one is which, but a quick Google search and you can check which one is 04 and 05 on employer choosing investments or employee choosing. Number three, once you figure out these things, is get the account open, right? You got 1 more week to get it open for 2025. So knock that out and then you can figure out contributions later. Like I said, our firm could probably get this open for you in under 15 minutes if you're on a time crunch to get this set up. We don't charge anything to set up the accounts. Most firms don't. Usually they're just going to charge you financial planning and investment management fees, but they're not going to charge you an upfront cost just to open the account. And really the only thing you need is your EIN number for your business. And then you'll need to fill out these forms, of course. But other than that, it's pretty easy to get this set up. Not too many hoops to jump through. So that's everything for today's webinar on Simple IRAs. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week and look forward to the next webinar. Have a good one.